It was in 2012 that I started learning how to code. And let me give you the background story. So in 2012, I was in high school and I happened to be selected to be part of the robotics team. And this was based on academic performance only. So I joined in not knowing anything about computers. I mean, I had not been exposed to it like that. And the thing that caught my attention was that these peers that I had that I was competing with in class had extra knowledge. When I say extra knowledge, they were doing stuff with technology, they were doing stuff on a computer that I had no idea about. They were discussing, having discussions that I couldn't comprehend. It sounded like Greek to me because I didn't understand anything that they were talking about. And that was where the motivation came from, because these are people that I was competing squarely with in class. But outside of the class, they had extra things that I had no idea about, and that positions them as better candidates towards anything at all than I would be considered. So for me to compete squarely with them, I also need to be a well-rounded individual, and that was where my motivation stemmed from. So I chose to start figuring out what else I could learn outside of what I'm being taught in class. And I walked into the library one day with a focus of looking for a book that was introduce me to some of these technologies, because I could see these people do a lot of things. I could see people were typing with typing speed of like 60 words per minute, where I could barely do 80 words per minute. So yeah, I mean, I was highly motivated to want to compete because I'm very competitive by nature, and up till I mean, throughout school, I was very competitive, always wanting to take first position. So getting to realize that some of my peers that I was even doing better than in class are like extremely good at some of these things that I had no idea about. So I got to the library and I got this book in particular. So there were a lot of books there, but the one book that stood out for me was a book about how to build your own websites using HTML and CSS. And that is when I picked that book and I started learning from that book. But just as I do with every other thing, learning to me was okay, you need to understand the things, you have to read it and recall it, try to explain it to yourself, write down as many things as you can. That was the same way that I learned programming. Would you say that's like the most efficient way to learn programming? I mean, it's a question, and I want to know your thoughts in the comment section. So go ahead and drop it in the comment section. Will you say that's the most effective way to learn programming? But that was the only way that I knew of, because for everything that I learned up to that point in time in my life, I learned it by taking the book, reading what is in there, and also trying to explain it, rewrite it, and recall as many things as I could from what I have learned. And unfortunately for me, I didn't have any computer, I didn't have access to a smartphone, and for that reason, that was the only way that I could do it at the time. And looking back at it, I still do not regret, because that was the only way and I did it, and I got to understand it, but then I didn't get to practice much because it was always me thinking that okay, if I write this thing, this is what it's going to give me. But a good thing about that book was that the book had pictures or images of the output, so it teaches you that for you to get this outcome, like in your HTML code or your CSS code, if you write this thing, this is what it should turn out to be. So I practically understood what they were doing, except that I had not built one on my own before. I had only written down the code in my notebook. Fast forward to now, I still keep learning new technology by day. In fact, I still feel that I am just getting started with programming and I do not know much, because the more I learn, the more I discover that I do not know, and I want to keep learning. But the more reason why I'm recording this video is to talk to you about something very important. When we begin to learn programming or any sort of technology, there are mistakes that as beginners we do that we do not even realize that that is a mistake that we are doing. So for instance, for me, when I was learning and using the books to learn reading, just as I did with every other thing that I had been taught so far in my life, I felt that that was the most efficient way to learn, because that was the best way I could learn, right? But as you might have said in a comment by now, that is definitely not a right way to learn. So there are a lot of ways that a lot of us as beginners, when we begin to learn some of these technologies or programming languages, how we choose to go about it is usually not the right way. And this is me bringing you that call to action that, hey, if you are not doing it right, you do not expect to go far with it. So I did it for several years. Eventually, I got a computer and I started learning how to code on the computer. I still felt that I knew nothing. I had to start all over again, and it has almost always happened. I have a similar story when I started learning SJS. I spent like a month watching tutorials, and this lesson was very good. The person teaching it was very good, so I could understand everything they were saying. But after a month, when I started writing our code, trying to build a project with Next.js, I came to realize that I knew nothing about it. And that is where a lot of us find ourselves, that we go and sit, we binge watch videos, or we read a whole book about the technology or the programming language, and eventually we realize that we do not even understand any of the things that we have learned so far, even though we spent all of this time watching a video or reading about it. So how do you avoid getting into that state? The first thing you want to do is to figure out the best way to learn that particular technology. And I can tell you for free that almost every programming language, almost every technology that you're going to learn, the best way to learn is to play with it. What do I mean by playing with it? So if you want to learn a new programming language, say you've chosen to learn Python, the best way to learn Python is to start coding in Python. So as soon as you've learned about variables, do not wait and say that, oh yeah, I understand. From what you have explained, I understand what variables are, but then you go and write the code yourself. And the more you do, the more you write, the more you practice, the more errors or challenges you are likely to face, and begin to fix it. What we do not usually pay attention to is that the videos that you're watching, the tutorials that this person is offering you, this is someone who has sat down upon it, recorded the videos, and made all editing as much as possible, so that you do not get to see all the mistakes they make. So you don't learn from their experience. They're just teaching you and passing the knowledge to you. But you can learn and gather your own experience by practicing as much as you can. So as soon as you start learning the technology, please start by writing out the code yourself. And going forward, in a couple of videos that I have planned, I'm going to walk you through how to learn, how to practically learn some of these technologies. For instance, if I take HTML and CSS, what's the best way to learn HTML and CSS? I'll share with you my practical experience, so that if you are struggling to figure out how to learn any of these technologies, you're going to be able to learn it. But in summary, all I'm saying to you is that there is obviously the best way or a good way to learn some of these technologies, irrespective of the resources that you are using. The most effective way to learn any new technology is for you to practice and get experience or exposure to it. If you've watched to this point in the video, I want to believe that this resonates with you and you are ready to make the switch from using the ineffective way of learning to a more effective way of learning. And therefore you want to look forward to the subsequent videos where I walk you through the various technologies and how to actually learn each of these technologies. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Also subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.